Amina is here.
Okay. Thank you, Divine. So we will start. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third session of the doctoral seminar series. My name is Dominique Somda, and I will host this seminar. I'm a researcher at HUMA. You will find a program for the remaining session of the next quarters on the HUMA website and on our social media. For the upcoming sessions, we have invited speakers to reflect on the challenges and strategies of doctoral work with a particular focus on the turning points and critical experiences that mark their research journey. Our guest today is Dr. Itai Makone. She's a postdoctoral research fellow at HUMA. She holds a PhD in political sciences from Stellenbosch University. She also holds 2 master's degrees, one in economics and a master's in international relations, and both masters are from the University of Zimbabwe. Itai's research interests include political risk analysis and security, public policy, governance, knowledge production in Africa, and research methodology. At HUMA, she's part of the Knowledge Activism Project. Today, Dr. Makone will share her wisdom for undertaking fieldwork. She will speak for about 15-20 minutes, and then we will open the floor for questions. So welcome, Itai, and I'm going to let you share your screen.
Into that. Good afternoon, everyone. Good day. I don't know which part of the world you're coming from, but good day, everyone. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Dominic, for inviting me to speak on this platform. It's a wonderful opportunity to be here. I hope to stick to 15 to 20 minutes. I have so much to share, but I'll share what's most relevant or most helpful in 20 minutes. So I'm just my presentation today will focus on wisdom, things you can do practically in the field when you're collecting your data, how it can be beneficial, what can go wrong, how you can mitigate it. That's my presentation today. My mistakes can be the lessons I learned from my mistakes. You can use them as stepping stones to do something better. And my presentation is not going to talk about which method to use. I'm assuming that's something you've already finalized, you have already chosen whether you're going to do in qualitative, quantitative, which tools you're going to use. That's something you have already finalized or are finalizing. So that's an overview of my presentation. So my introduction, like Dominic already gave a good introduction. Thank you very much. For my PhD study, I had the privilege of interviewing 28 key informant studies. For me, my fieldwork was the best part, which was one of the best parts of my research journey, because it allowed me access in offices that I would never be allowed as a normal, ordinary citizen. And I've benefited from the contacts that I've gotten over that time in that period, but it wasn't as smooth. I mean, everything doesn't go according to plan, but it's an interesting learning curve, and it's something that you should be probably open and excited to participate in. So starting with fieldwork. Fieldwork doesn't start when you start going to the field or when you start collecting data. I think it starts way earlier than that. You should have the mental preparation that fieldwork starts while you're still writing up your research proposal. You should already start thinking about your fieldwork. I would say, as soon as your research proposal is out, get your ethical clearance from your institution, whether at UCT or whatever institution that you are. Make sure that you get that straight away, because that can take time. It can take 2 to 3 months. Now with COVID, there's so many regulations to factor in. So make sure as soon as you finish your research proposal, get your ethical clearance, because that'll also deter you from going to the field. And it can take a reasonable amount of time. When I was told by a colleague that, oh, your fieldwork can take 6 months, I was like, no, what will I be doing 6 months? but I actually spent 5 months in the field. So just have the preparation, like the mindset that it can take you between 3 to 4 months to 6 months, plus or minus. It depends. If you get it quicker, it's better, but you can have challenges and setbacks that can make it go all the way to 6 months or more for sometimes. I know of a friend who did 8 months. And so what I would suggest is before you go to the field, start making connections. Be it the company you want to visit, start sending out letters, start introducing yourself that this is so-and-so, I'm planning to do this, even before your clearance comes. Just then start creating contact with potential participants. If you're doing it in the same country that you're already, that's perfect because you can even start visiting the country. Now with COVID, you can't do that maybe, but you can at least start knocking on people's doors. But if you're going to have to move countries, start sending emails early because people don't have a culture of replying emails in certain countries, like where I did. People, they would admit they saw my emails, but they didn't reply them. No, they were, oh, you're the one who sent that email. We thought we replied it, but they know they didn't. You see. So start creating contacts 3 to 4 months before you go to the field, while you're even still writing up, just to create contact to say, I intend to do a study with you. Are you open? What do I require? Something like that. And if you're going to be dealing with like a multinational organization or big organizations like World Bank, and probably supposed to stay in Angola, and the headquarters is in South Africa, or the regional headquarters is in South Africa, I would suggest that you seek permission from the regional offices first. Because the setback I had, I interviewed multinational companies. And when I would ask them, because I wanted to talk about a sensitive topic, political risk analysis, people thought I was talking about politics, when of course I was talking about politics, but the business side of politics, how politics would affect their decision-making processes. People would say to me, no, your study goes against our policy. It is not in line for us to disclose our policy, etc. So I figured if I had sought regional permission first, it was so much easier for them to grant me permission, vet my papers, vet what I'm saying, speak to my supervisor, my institution way before time. They would grant me the permission, and then the country I'm actually investigating would be easier or welcoming to my research. So try that. It might be more helpful than knocking on people's doors directly. And as best as you can, get a gatekeeper. Get somebody who will refer you to the audience that you're looking for. Some audiences are easy to talk to, like academics are always willing to talk. You knock upon an academic's door, they really want to talk. They're looking for a crowd. But you go to companies, you go to NGOs, embassies, people are skeptical. They want to know who referred you, where you're coming from. So it's far best as you can get an academic to refer you to the sector that you want, get somebody to open a door for you. And then what I would suggest also is pre-test your interview guide or your questionnaire. I didn't do this. I would make it up and change it as I go in the field. But it would help if you get your colleagues, either the same peers as you, same age, master's students maybe, or your friends. Just ask them questions about what you want to ask. It helps you organize your questions in a certain flow, and it helps you also redefine and rethink some of the things that you're asking. And if you're going to send emails, the tip that I found that worked is go to Google. If, let's say, it's Standard Chartered Bank that you're working with, go to Google, you're on the finance department. Look for a specific name on the finance department, pull up a name and an email address, and send directly to someone's email. Email addresses that usually go to info@stan, those ones are not replied, or they take forever to be replied, and you have no mechanism to follow up an email that says info@. So try and get somebody's name on Google or somebody's email on Google. Or if you're going to drop a paper at their offices, try and find somebody's name so that you can always come back and say, I left my papers for Mr. So-and-so, did Mr. So-and-so respond? That might get you more results than just leaving out papers without a specific response. And looking at potential problems that can arise, there are so many. I'll just list a few and give you some of the tips that I think that can work for you best. So if you're going to record your meetings, right, I would suggest at all times use two devices. I would use a phone and a recorder. And at one time I forgot to switch on, like to record with one device. So it meant if I didn't have the backup one, it means I wouldn't have that interview. I would have to remember what the person was saying word for word, and I wouldn't be able to ask them again, say, oh, please, can I have an interview? Time is thin. People don't have that much time for you. And I would strongly advise that you be very flexible with your time. Arrive early if it's a face-to-face interview, arrive early. And sometimes because you're at work, be prepared to spend some more time. I remember there's an interview that I got there early, and I think I only saw him after 2 hours. Of course, the respondent did take advantage of my time, but I really needed the interview. So I waited. If you don't have another interview, be patient and be flexible with your time. And what would help you is if you're going to an interview, ask yourself, if somebody gives you 10 minutes, 10 good minutes, and they ask you, what is it that you want from them? You should be able to ask them the specific question that is most important to that respondent, because people don't have the luxury of giving you so much time. So if they give you 10 minutes, what are you going to ask them? I actually had one guy who said, I'm only giving you 10 minutes. In these 10 minutes, I can't see you again. So think up of it. What's the most important question you have to ask that respondent before you go to them? And then if you have different categories of respondents, maybe 3 or 4, all the questions don't really apply to all 4 categories in the same order of importance. So prioritize the ones that do matter to the respondents that you're talking to, at least in order of importance to the respondent that you're talking to. And one person is going to talk about ethics later. I would advise that be ethical. Some respondents will want to drop out, and some will probably halfway through rethink their commitment and say, I want to be here. You should be ethical and respect their wishes. I had to ask mine, do you still want me to use the information in the recording? And he said no, and I had to delete it in seconds. That's being ethical. But you ask them, you can at least ask them, can I use it? If they say yes, you can go ahead. If they say no, you can't use it. And your most important support system in your journey is your supervisor. I would suggest that you keep your supervisor in the loop. Like send them emails or text messages. If you're in a place where emails don't work, try and get their WhatsApp number. If you can WhatsApp them to say, this is what I did last week. These are the challenges that I'm facing. This is what has been happening. Just keep them in the loop so that they can understand your progress in the field. Don't detach, because 6 months or 3 months is a long time for you to be away from your supervisor. And you might need them like for help when you need them to directly send emails to the respondents. And then if you're failing to get respondents, another tip that worked for me was I would ask my last respondent, who can I talk to in your network? And they would easily refer me and give me a number. And I would say to the respondent, Mr. So-and-so gave me a number, Mr. So-and-so gave me a number. It was easier for them to talk to me because somebody had referred me. So you can try that tip if you're failing to get respondents in time or people that are willing to talk. And then with the age of COVID, I think you can be as innovative to use different platforms. You can call MS Teams, whatever platform that you use, just remember to record because you need the recording. And then if you're going to be dealing with extremely sensitive topics, with kids, prisoners, patients in the hospital, my advice is don't try and deal with that respondent on your own. Make sure they have a guardian or someone who's responsible for them that can just be there. They might not have to speak, but they just have to be there in the meeting. And sometimes you have very awesome and fantastic interviews with respondents, but then whatever you have talked about does not feed into your research question or your research proposal. It was a good conversation, but not addressing your topic or your question. So I would suggest you take a minute when you're about to end, you say, let me just go through my guide. You look at the things that you meant to cover, see how much you've covered, what you have addressed and what you haven't addressed. It will help you pick up the ones that are not addressed, and then you can easily ask them again if the respondent still has time. And then you also have the fantastic opportunity that You can always email them the things you forget. You send them hoping that they reply, but you can always email them to say, I forgot this question. Is this what you meant? I didn't quite understand. Some people are very helpful. They will reply your emails, but if you can see someone face to face, ask everything you need there and then. Moving on to transcription, I don't have much to say about this. I actually didn't understand what transcribing was until I had to do it. I thought that you just write the things that you thought were the most important. Actually, transcribing is word to word, what the respondent said, what you said, what they said, like the whole interview. And I would say, do it yourself. I know there are transcribing companies and people who offer such services, but I'd suggest you do it yourself. You familiarize with the data, it sticks in your head. You kind of map out what you are getting and what you're understanding from the data as you do it. I didn't do it while I was doing my interviews, and I paid a huge price because it took me 2 months to then transcribe the interviews because some of them were very long. As far possible as you can. When you don't have in-between meetings, when you don't have things that you're organizing for the next meeting, try and transcribe as you go. It makes the job a whole lot easier than doing a 2 months chunk or 3 months chunk of transcribing because it's taking time from your research to actually write up anything. And then for coding, depending on which method you're taking, quantitatively, you'll have to have had the codes before, like when you send out your questionnaire, and qualitatively, you generate them as you go with your data. As I was saying, you are limited. You don't have that much time. I would suggest that you learn a software. Get a software to help you manage the data. You do the analysis, but get a software to manage it. There's so many softwares out there. I know UCT subscribes to some of them, in Vivo, Atlas, whatever, but get a software that you can use, that you can understand. And you don't have to be a guru in the software. For me, I knew I wanted to do Atlas, but then the training sessions for Atlas lapsed when I was in the field. The university was having training sessions and I didn't get to do that. What I did is I got a PhD student who was ahead of me. He taught me the software in 3 to 4 days, taking me every day to say, this is what you do, this is what you do. I had my transcriptions and he helped me to sort out my data, the first 3, 4 sets, showing me how to do the software. So you can always learn a software. There's so many open source softwares as well, like R. You can always learn it. It will help you manage your data. It saves you time other than trying to do it the long way. And yeah, that's what I would advise for when you are finishing, when you have done your transcriptions and you're doing your coding. Learn a software. You can always get a friend. You can always get a student who's ahead of you, or you can always do the trainings when they come, but try and do them before you actually go to the field. It can help you. And my take-home nuggets. I would say enjoy your fieldwork. It's a wonderful time, it's a wonderful experience, but be flexible, be prepared, be very flexible because now there's COVID, so you have to think outside the box. Maybe your flexibility might come in the sense that instead of having a 1 hour Zoom meeting, you can have it in 15-minute chunks to say 15 minutes today, 15 minutes next week, 15 minutes the other week with the respondent. So think outside the box and be a bit more flexible in your planning or in your approach to participants. And as far best as you can, get referrals. Referrals come from anywhere and everywhere. If you're a PhD student, sometimes you don't want to talk about your research, but talk about your research to your neighbor, to your gardener, to the person down the street. They might actually pop a question and say, oh, I know someone who does this. So referrals come from anywhere. They don't just come from specialists. Talk about your research when you're in the field as much as you can, because it opens doors for you. I got a referral when I was visiting someone in the hospital, and I was telling them I'm getting stuck. My research is not moving. I'm not getting any participants in this area. So referrals come from anywhere. Just talk about your research. It will come to you. And use your network of PhD students, either master students, PhD students, the same level, those above, they're much more, you're in the same, you have experienced the same challenges. So make sure you utilize those people because you can benefit a lot from them. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ita. Yes, if you can please stop sharing. Thank you so much. So now it's going to be time for questions. So we are going to, the floor is open. So you can either like use a little like waving emoji to signal that you have a question, or you can write something on the chat. Like before, like, you know, you think about your questions, I'm going to ask one myself. I was very interested in how you insisted on the planning phase for the interviews, and you really focus on the interview part of the fieldwork. And just a little a little side note, when you said, oh, 6 months is a very long time, I'm sure like you know, if there's, you know, other anthropologists in the audience, we're like, no, that's not. We spend a lot of time in the fieldwork, and we enjoy that, and we don't think it's a waste of time. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of difference in terms of disciplines, like, you know, about the standards of length and, you know, time spent on the field. One of the questions that I had, I really appreciated that you differentiated between different kind of interviewees, and you mentioned that academics like to talk, we know that, and that you know, like sometimes, you know, people in different institutions were a little more reluctant. I was also interested in understanding like the difference between preparing interviews with experts versus non-experts. I think there are like, there's a special kind of preparation and expectation, and I would like you to address those differences, both like what it is to prepare for an expert, and what it is to prepare for a conversation where you might think that, you know, using like your very specialized jargon and, you know, or like very conceptual you know, discourse would not work as well. So yeah, if you could address like those distinctions, I would think, you know, would be very useful for us.
Okay. I would say, thank you so much, Dominic, for the question. My take would be, it's all guided by your research question. What are you trying to achieve? What are the goals that you want to achieve? What do you want to get out of the interview? So if you're going to meet an expert, you are like, your literature and your guide and whatever you have already guides you to draft up the questions that you want to ask. And for an expert, you can go as deep and as much into the questions and the technicalities, because they already understand the language, they understand the terminology, they understand where you're coming from without having to explain too much, right? But if you're then going to have a conversation with a community worker who's not an expert in that area, you have to tone it down to get to the person, the level the person is, so that you can get more. If you speak so much jargon, you're not going to get a lot of information from the conversation. So you have to tone it down to, I can't say layman, but you have to tone it down so that they can understand what you're saying and give you the relevant information that you are talking about. You can then synthesize and make it into the jargon in your findings. But for you to extract the information, it has to be accessible and understandable for the respondents to answer. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think I like you when you say toning down. It's not necessarily like, you know, reducing the content quality, but maybe being, for example, more descriptive, or like trying to be more explicit, rather than relying on the words that are you know, maybe more conceptual or more connected to the discipline of expertise. Okay, is there any question amongst us? Okay, I'm looking at, at our audience. I'm looking at the chat. I don't think we have any question yet. I'm going to be. Oh, sorry. Oh, I see Chikezi. Okay, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Tai.
Hi, Kevin.
Well done on a fantastic presentation. It's very useful. I mean, and talking about field work at any level is important, not just for doctoral students, but also for researchers. So it's also, I find it useful for myself too. And I was wondering, and I know that you mentioned this during your presentation, but I was wondering how you navigated, or how do you navigate a situation where you want to interview a key informant and they're telling you that what you're researching is against company policy and the institutional bottlenecks and bureaucracy around it. They waste your time. At the end of the day, they still won't agree to have the interview. How do you navigate such a challenge during a field work?
I faced it a lot of times. I got many rejections, especially from multinational companies. So there are two ways you can solve that one. You can either, as I said before, if it's not the headquarters, you can always go back to the headquarters, to the actual headquarters of the company, and seek permission from there, because they're the ones that make company policy at the end of the day, either at the headquarters or the regional office of that company. And it might take you a bit of time, but at least the excuse that it's not company policy, if they don't want to talk to you, they'll have to come up with another excuse, not company policy, because they're the makers of company policy. That's one avenue of doing it. That will take time. And then the other avenue of doing it is, if you have colleagues that, if you have other respondents that you have spoken to already, that know people from that company, they can refer you directly. And at least the respondent you want to talk to, or the set of respondents you want to talk to, might be more open because another company or another like-minded company spoke to you. So those are two areas that I think you can handle that one. But they don't guarantee results, but you can try those two suggestions.
All right, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chikezi. And we have a question from Mimi. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much, Itai, for your presentation. I'd like to make a comment. It's not a question, but it's a comment based on my past research experience in anthropology. I've noticed that I've faced several challenges methodologically when doing my research. With structured interviews, which limit the amount of data you get from participants. So, sometimes when you are interviewing a person, when you present to them a structured way of speaking, or your presence has paper, it kind of feels heavy for them as research participants. So you have to be open to improvising your approaches and your interviewing strategy or your conversational strategy, which is what I've had to do, especially in my master's back in rural Zimbabwe. That was really challenging. So, in anthropology, where you are trying to establish a pattern of whatever you're studying, you need to be prepared to improvise and see which methods are better for the people that you are doing research with. And another thing that really helped me was having a diary that I reflect on every day. So I think in anthropology, it's very common to have a diary for your own notes to reflect on, which is what I would recommend for anthropology researchers. I
also like something that you talked about, Mimi, like being flexible to like take the conversation where it takes you when you're talking to someone, because the structuralness of it sometimes inhibits more flow or you getting more information. I really like that point, and researchers can also take note of that, that you have to be open to, it's a semi-structured interview, it's not a full rigid interview. You can always digress and ask, and if they give you like a thread, pull it the way that the direction that the interviewee is taking it. Thank you.
And also another thing is like, it's very common for us to arrive on the field with a proposal on, I want to do this. And sometimes your research takes another turn because what you might have preconceived is not really what is on the ground. And is that what you experience? Because I experienced that as well. Like sometimes I have a proposal, I want to do this, and then my data is saying something else. Then I have to write about something that's not completely different, but slightly off topic.
I didn't experience that myself. I went to find out if the perceptions were still valid. So my findings brought out various perceptions that had changed. Some were new, some were emerging, but I was just looking for perceptions. So that was still valid. I have a friend though, who is an anthropologist. His research completely changed. He went to the field and he wanted to do border studies on the border. And when he got to the border was closed. No one was, he wanted to do both countries, but then the border was closed. So he had to completely change his study to focus on one side of the border. For 6 months, the border was closed.
Yeah.
So
I guess you could, I guess also the reason why the border might have been closed is another discussion that could have been valuable for his own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Itai.
Thanks, Mimi.
Yeah, thank you both, Mimi, for those observations. And like flexibility is really key in doing the field work. And coming back to the interview process, something that I wanted to ask you about, and that's certainly like that might be like a difference within discipline as well. I know that like when I conduct interviews, I tend to observe a lot, like how people are behaving, or like the non-verbal signs that exist in the interaction. So there's what they say, which is like the explicit discourse, and what goes without saying, that may be too obvious for them, or maybe that they don't want to say because they are embarrassed, or they are angry by your questions, etc., etc. So yeah, I think I don't know if this is something that you also practice, like this kind of observation during interviews.
Yes, thank you very much, Dominic, for that. And observations help you. They do help in also. You can also see that the person is not comfortable with the question. Like when you observe, you get a lot of like the non-verbal cues. You get a lot of information that might be worth documenting in your study. In my study, there was no room for me to then document so much of it. The political perceptions, and in as much as people work in organizations, what I did learn is they have their own political affiliation. So they have to say what the organization wants, but they have their own perceptions that might be different. And you can actually tell when someone is talking to you that this is the company position, but they are saying it, but they're not really willing. This is not what they're willing to say, or they're defending it because it's like their own personal take of what is happening. And it does help. It does also help you to know your limits when you are interviewing people. Like when you're observing somebody and they're now getting angry, for both your safety, it might be worthwhile to retract, change the question, help the respondent not to inflame, and then probably ask that question in a different way that does not provoke them. So it's a valuable thing to take note of observations of what their nonverbal cues are saying when you are interviewing people.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a way also to adapt and adjust your line of questioning or your attitude into, yeah, no, that's true. That's very true. Even if it's not something that you are going to analyze per se, it's still something that you use like in the moment. Yeah, thank you. I wanted to say that so for those who are not looking at the chat, Chikiti was giving an information on transcription application. Chikiti, do you want to maybe say a few words about it? Okay, just, oh yeah, oh, you're yeah.
Yeah, I think I pretty much said, so it's an application I found useful in recent times for transcribing some of my audio recordings. And even, yeah, it works very well because you can also schedule it. I mean, for every Zoom meeting I have, it kind of gives me like a notification that this meeting has started and ask if it can record it. So, but it's not something I do, but it's something that, you know, works very well with mobile phone or with any other device. You can actually record live interviews or live proceedings, and it can actually give it can actually pick the different voices and, you know, the different speakers separately, and then give you the result at the end of the recording. So yeah, that's what I just wanted to say. But sometimes, like I said, it doesn't give you a 100% accuracy, but it gives you most of it. So what you can do is to go back and listen to your original audio and then go through the transcription that it produces and then maybe correct here and there. Yeah, I find it very useful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for those precisions. I think we have a question from Job, and then we'll have a question from Mimi.
Okay, thank you, Itai, for that useful and very important presentation on fieldwork tips. I just wanted to just contribute on your previous point, Dominique, when you were mentioning about the nonverbal cues that perhaps you get from the fieldwork. And also, you know, you being denied entry by gatekeepers when you're in the field. I found that one to be, you know, to be very important data that you can reflect on during your analysis. So for me, when I fail to get data, I ask myself, you know, questions, as in why is it the case? Is there more to it? And in qualitative research, actually, you can reflect on that and even analyze that, and you can find out to be a very important, you know, data set. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. We have, I think, a question from Mimi now.
Okay, here we go. Well, I have a question. I have a question and another comment. So my question is, you know, you're in the field, you said, for 6 months, for anthropologists maybe for a year or 18 months. Is there a way, what mechanism did you use to save your data? Sometimes when you save your data on a hard drive, what if it gets lost? And in a situation where you have to save your data on a cloud and you have little access to internet, how would we then go about that? I think that's a concern I have, at least for myself. And the other part, the second part I wanted to say was, or should I pause? And then I'll say it. Okay, you can respond and then I can say the second part.
No, it's okay. Go on.
Oh, okay. The second part is.
So I was.
Oh, sorry. I think there's a connection maybe issue.
Okay.
Wait. Let me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, I switched off my video. My internet was acting up.
Okay.
So for storage, I was paranoid. I stored my data on every platform possible because I didn't want to lose it. Like my audios, I used the OneDrive. OneDrive, like UCT OneDrive, I think, and it has a lot of capacity. So after every meeting, when I had internet, I stored both recordings, my phone and my recorder, on the OneDrive, on my laptop, various parts in my laptop, in the C drive, in my documents, and I also saved it on my Gmail, on my Google Drive, and I would email them as well. So I did as many. I'd email them to myself so that they would always be my email, and I would email them to my school account so that they'd always be my school account. So I tried as much as possible not to lose the interview because I knew I couldn't go back. That's how I did for storage. But your concern is more on you don't have Wi-Fi, so what do you do? Like you don't have Wi-Fi in the field constantly, so what do you do? You can try save it on your laptop. You save it on your laptop, on your hard drive, and that's how transcribing would work as well. Because if you transcribe it early, you don't lose it. You don't then lose it, unlike if you wait to transcribe in the end. And then when you have access to internet, the minute you have access to internet, try uploading to as many clouds in your account as you can. That way it's safe, but they have to be your accounts, not anybody else's accounts, because in your ethics, you say you're not going to share the data with anybody else.
Yeah.
And I just to interject, like I want to also give an old school method that I used like during my first time on the field, and that's going to show my age, but I don't care. That's fine. But I remember at the time, like it was very difficult to send like heavy stuff. Email existed. I'm not that old, but it was hard. So I would like print my photos and print my notes, and I would send them via mail, like real mail. And I would send that to my family. I would send that to to friends, so that how it worked, like really like trying to make sure that those things exist, like for real in another part of the world. Okay, that can still work.
The other thing I wanted to say I'm just drawing from last week's conversation that I had during the PhD seminar with Dominique and Amina regarding the safety of being a researcher, particularly being a female researcher. Oftentimes we might be in situations that are precarious, that would require some precaution. And these are things that are not commonly discussed prior your research. Of course, there's so much emphasis on, how to protect the data of your participant, but also like, are there any things that you took into account as a female researcher going to do your research? Any things that you would advise a prospective fieldwork researcher to take note of?
Thank you. That's actually an important question that we don't think about as researchers. I would prescribe to the notion of like do interviews during the day at their workplaces. You get it? Not in your comfortable space, but at their workplaces where there are lots of people. Like if you show up at an organization, you're going to be like, you log in and you're going to have to go to an office and log out, and there are probably cameras everywhere. Don't do it in your space, like at your house or at their house. I would suggest stick to workplace offices because they're working hours, they're daytime hours. I did probably do one thing odd. I did go to a male respondent's house one time, but at least I didn't go alone. I had my children and maid in the car, and they stayed in the car. Should anything happen to me, they stayed in the car and then they were put in the living room. So should anything happen to me, I'm in the dining having the interview, I have people that have come that can be witnesses. But I wouldn't recommend doing that again. I would say go to the workplaces and at least have somebody know where you're going at any given time. Like whether it's your friend, whether it's your cousin, whether it's like text someone to say I'm going there, so that there's some accountability to look for you if we can't find you. Somebody knows where you went.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was an important addition that, you know, it's, yeah. As Mimi said, yeah, there's a lot of concerns to have and not maybe enough discussion around that, not explicitly and, you know, publicly. Okay, we have a question from Job. So Job, if you want to.
Yeah, mine is not a question, but to contribute on what Itai was saying on saving your data in cloud platforms. Now, recently, that has elicited some ethical questions in that some of those platforms are not safe for saving some data. So when you're applying for ethical clearance, for instance, they may ask you whether the platform that you're going to save your data is going to be safe or not. So maybe you have to check whether platforms such as OneDrive have end-to-end encryption or the possibility of saving your data using perhaps a password, password protected folders and so on, so that that data is not accessible to anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Job, for that contribution. It's something I'd actually not thought of. I'm just thinking your OneDrive, you're the only person who can access it because you have a password, but that actually is a very valid point. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I think you mentioned Itai something about consent, and you went back to it, like as we're discussing about like the storage of data. And I want to ask you, like, you know, before we wrap up like the session, like maybe to go back to that and to maybe explore a little bit more like the different aspect of it and like the practicalities of it. So like in some places we encounter issues of language or issues of ability to read, to understand like the language of consent. How do you ensure that you are in an ethical space at all time, like managing the consent to use of data, to storage of data, etc., etc.?
Okay. I think the question I actually get is on consent from the participant, right? Like how do you ensure that you get consent from the person, from the respondent, and that you are within those limits the whole time of the interview? So it's not always like, it's not a cast in stone. Some respondents are quite easy to agree to your consent, like to say, this is my study. And you find respondents like academics, they're quite easy to get consent from because they understand the value of the consent in doing your research. And then other respondents, so what I then worked out with other respondents was, I would say, you don't have to, like, you can give me your consent, your verbal consent, but you still need to write it down because it needs to be documented. We can have the interview. If you're satisfied with what we've talked about, you can then sign the written one, and I can keep my recording. And so I'd make them sign two informed consent, one that I would go with and one they would stay with. That was so much easier because at least they also had the proof that they talked to me and they gave me willingly. And so you could try, if somebody doesn't understand English, at least bring it down to their language and explain it to them in their language. They're more comfortable to give you their consent if they understand what you're talking about. Or you can then work out to say, give me your verbal consent before we start. And at the end, you can sign. If you're not comfortable, we can delete in your presence the recording and they can be comfortable with that. So, and yeah, I think that for now, the consent with email. So I also had people that emailed their responses. Mm-hmm. Some of them didn't give me their consent, like they just filled the information. And then I would then send them an informed consent to say, please, can you sign this? It's very important that I get it like in written form that you consented to talk to me. That's the only way I can then be able to use the information that you sent me. Some of them replied late. Some of them had to go and knock on their offices again because they're academics. They're easier to find. So for those that email their responses, you can first attach like the informed consent, sending it out. If they don't feel it, send it again to get it so that you can be able to use the information that they give. That's what I.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's quite thorough. We have like a comment from Mimi about a data management plan that is available at UCT. Okay, if you are interested, you can go in the chat and try to use that link. Okay, so we are arriving at the end of our time. Thank you so much, Itai, for all of those very important tips, and that you exceeded like kind of your mission with that was to explain like the art of the interviews and interview-centered fieldwork and the planning of it and the implementation of the plan. And we have so much more here. So thank you so much. And next session, so it's going to be on the 21st of April, and we are going to have Job Moha that is going to be presenting on organization. Dr. Moha is a very organized person. Itai, we know it, right? We've experienced it. Yeah. And he's going to discuss how to organize kind of the chaos of the experience of the fieldwork. You are coming back with all of those data, all of those information, and what you do with it is something that is quite important, like not to feel overwhelmed with the quantity of the information that you gathered. So that's what we're going to do in 2 weeks. And so I hope that you are going to all join us to discuss it. Yes, so, okay, we have Eduardo. Yeah, okay, I'm going to take this information to let you know. But if you want, for people who are not aware necessarily of like the calendar of FIUMA's events, you can go on our website. It's always available, and on Facebook, Twitter, all of those events are advertised. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we are going to end the session.
I want to say something.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
I want to give a big shout out to my doctoral supervisor. She's in the room. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you, Derek, for coming.
That's very important. Like as you said, supervisors are absolutely key at all stage of our work. Yeah.
Chair, if I may, maybe. If I may quickly just say, it was such a rewarding experience to see Itai's journey from the first day that we met to the end. And I'm actually getting a bit teary-eyed now to see her presentation today.
Oh, thank you, Derek.
That's very nice. I'm going to be teary-eyed as well. It's very. I have nothing to do in your little experience, but you know, it's I share the feeling. You know, it's also something that I have with my own supervisor. It's a lot of gratefulness and gratitude. Okay, thank you, and I'm